Good morning, good afternoon, welcome. Thank you all for being with us today as part of this very fun 5 minutes or less series that Skillable is putting on with different industry experts. Today, I am so excited to have not only a friend, but also one of the industry's foremost experts, I would say, in training. He's a former CLO, but also has over 25 years of experience at some of the world's largest organizations, Google, Novartis, Microsoft. So we've got quite the expert on our hands to give us some peer opinions and some best practices. So welcome, Marc. Thank you for being with us. How are you today?
I'm doing outstanding, Sarah. Thank you for the invitation and really excited to be here.
Good, thank you. Okay, so for all of you, a couple of things. Though Marc is the speaker, I know that there's a lot of experts in the room. I saw the registration list, so please let us know where you're calling in from. Also, if you have a point or a piece of advice or something that you want to riff on a question for Marc, please put it in the chat. We would love to hear from you. Let us know where it is you're calling in from, maybe your organization. And of course, if you have any questions, we will try to get to them. This series is designed to be quick, lightning fast rounds. In fact, I have a timer going to hold us accountable. Marc, I don't know, how are we going to do with the 5-minute answers?
I love it. I love the pressure. There's
Okay,
there's this
good.
thing called being succinct, Sarah, which
Yes.
might be missing in our world. So I'm going to try to follow the rules.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm not a rule follower, but we're going to try really hard. I would consider them just guidelines, but you and I can do it. I feel really good about it. So, okay. Are you ready to start, my friend, jumping in?
Let's go.
Okay. Let's start with kind of state of the state. I always like to set the foundation for folks. Oh gosh, I got to start our 5 minutes. Okay. Here we go. Counting down. Give me the state of the state. You are really well connected in the industry. You've been in the space a long time. Let's talk. Of course, everyone's talking AI, but outside of AI, what are some things that you're seeing? What are some things that training and learning leaders need to kind of have on their radar today?
Good question. I'll keep it succinct because I think there's a lot here. I guess starting off at kind of a macroeconomics perspective, there's obviously a lot of commotion related to what's happening in various parts of the world from a macroeconomics perspective. Inflation, we have this thing called the tariffs going on. It's disrupting Wall Street and other forms of stock exchange and so forth. So that might not feel like it's directly impacting L&D, but we all know it is.
Yeah.
Either directly if your company is involved in shipping and trading and so forth, or indirectly if you're just part of that value chain. So that's just one thing I'm thinking a lot about. The other one too, it's actually the anti-AI, if there is such a thing. So by
Okay.
that I mean two things. One is, and you know this as well, Sarah, and probably so many folks on this webinar, there's a lot of hype still. And the thing is, the hype ain't going away. The hype is just getting more sophisticated. And that's mostly because as we're starting to find more and more things in terms of the benefits of a large language model and this whole thing called agentic AI agents and so forth, that's becoming a lot more sophisticated and a lot more real in terms of its practical use and benefits. That said, it's opening up a whole new uh, uh, set of opportunities and cans of worms in terms of, okay, what's all this new stuff meaning? So by that, I mean, my second point is not so much an anti AI, it's mostly anti-AI noise because it's
Mm.
just trying to figure out exactly what's my reality, what's my place, what's in it for me, given all this stuff. And then I think if there's a third thing, and I think we might get to this hopefully, because I think it'll be very beneficial for our audience, is really thinking about less about what happens with, AI creating new forms of content and new forms of media and, text-based PowerPoint slide decks and videos and all that stuff. I get it. That's cool. That is still part of the hype. For me, I've been thinking a lot more about what's happening behind the scenes in the world for our
Mhm.
L&D teams, what's happening from an operational standpoint, what's happening from an analytics and insight standpoint, what's happening from a change management perspective as we're trying to shift the capabilities of our teams from the prior school or the current school of ways of working and processes and tools and ADDIE models to this new world and trying to figure out what that means as well. So those are three kind of high level things I've been thinking a lot about.
I love it. And my friend, you did it with 2 minutes to spare. Look at you go. I love it. Okay. All right, we're going to start it over because you basically set up the transition for the next one. So,
which means this next one is going to be more complicated and therefore 7 minutes.
right there. Yes, you're right. Let's just add on the time and just continue going. I love it. Good thinking. So, you talked a lot about the shift that's happening right now. And I think that's a really nice place to go next because I think it's a hard world, right? We have so many people trying to envelop AI into what they're doing, but perhaps it's without a strategy. Perhaps they're trying to rush it to keep up with, as you said, the hype and some of the other kind of expectations around it. But I think a lot of groundwork needs to be done to be able to bring it into an organization in a really cohesive and impactful way. So let's start there. What advice would you give leaders as we are looking at this shift and kind of the way AI is impacting how we work and the expectations, especially of learning and training? What could they be thinking about? What should they be thinking about?
So the way that I would maybe rephrase the question, if that's okay, Sarah.
Yeah, of course.
There's a lot of thinking that's already kind of going on, in my opinion. I think it's very, very important that, which is so applicable to our world of instructional design and pedagogical approaches. There's this thing called usefulness and application. So by that I mean, I think for a lot of folks on this webinar, and then for the teams that you work with and you support, it's one thing to kind of be, endorsing and being excited about the glamour of all the stuff that's happening and the possibilities and the options and the wows. And then I said on the other side, there's still a lot of the hype stuff as you kind of look at this spectrum.
Okay.
What's really, I think, important particularly for the L&D leaders and the talent leaders and the HR leaders on this call is you gotta jump into the pool and you gotta use this stuff. It's so important before you get too much thinking in terms of what does this mean to me strategically? Does this modify our operational plans, et cetera, et cetera? Get in, get dirty, play around with your favorite LLM, or what I love to do, frankly, maybe you feel the same, you do the same, Sarah. What I do is I typically have maybe 3 or 4 LLMs open at the same time. And then what I do is part out of curiosity and fun, I'll ask all 4 the exact same prompt. And then just out of curiosity and maybe a little bit of fun, I'll just check out to see, the quality, the accuracy, the relevance, the truth, the truthiness of the responses. Because you know what? On one side, it's kind of super boring because in a way, they're almost saying the exact same thing, almost verbatim, which kind of makes you think what's really going on. And then on the other side, if you ask a different question, and then you ask that question, maybe starting off with, one different type of LLM, whether it's a ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, or it doesn't really matter in terms of which way you do it. But if you ask a different type of question and the prompt is structured with a lot more detail, right? Here's the use cases, here's the examples, here's the role I would like you to play, ... The more specific you ask your prompt, then pop that into your 4 or 5 different LLMs. And you know what? The responses better not be dang exactly the same. They should be really, really different. And that's what I mean by getting in and getting dirty and applying. Get in and understand how these things think, for lack of better words and terms, because they all operate, they all reason kind of differently, but it depends how sophisticated and detailed your ask, your question, your prompt, or your prompting. You should never settle for the first prompt, and just see how friendly and supportive the responses and the process, the engagement is going to look like. So anyway, my point is get in, and then there's the whole big realm of all these AI tools that can, yes, build content, that can build videos, that can, do podcasts for you and with you, ... Let alone organize all your content and help you with your research and help you with your brainstorming. Get in and just try. Because then you'll understand really, 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 just kind of sum things up. In the end, you need to understand how this new relationship, human and AI, for lack of better words, what does this really look like?
Mm-hmm.
and how do we benefit, frankly, each other? By that, I mean, we need to understand that, yes, while AI is a bunch of zeros and ones at the end of the day, and there's this whole, aspect of anthropomorphizing the technology. In other words, giving it human-like characteristics.
Mm.
I get that. But it's a relationship. And the better we can understand this relationship from an augmented perspective, the better we're going to succeed in our life, in our careers, and definitely in our work.
I love that. And I think, one of the things that you shared with me early on as AI was coming in is that even the more that you interact with these tools, the more personalized and the better that they're going to learn you as well, right? So to your point about combining the human with the AI element, the more we interact, the more we try, the more the AI agents get to know us, the better the response will be as well. Never use the first one, like you said. But I think that just continues to speak to why you have to continue to invest time, understand the tools, understand what's coming. And in one of our last series on this, we talked about with Sandra from EPAM. She mentioned trying different ones as well. And you said the same, having 4 out there. So I think that that's really smart. Don't just settle with one. Play around, get to know the tools inside of that.
Yep.
Really important.
Yep.
Okay, my friend, our timer's going up. Next question. Okay, hot take for you. We talked just now about macroeconomic climate and how that's kind of shifting the learning and training approach. Now, Marc, I'm going to ask you something a little uncomfortable. You've been in the space, you have done this, you've implemented many a tool, technology, training program, strategy. Why is training the first thing that gets cut when things get tough from an organization or macroeconomic climate? And what can we do about it?
Well, Sarah, there's nothing like being uncomfortably excited. So there you
Right.
go. And it's not discomfort, it's uncomfort. It's really it's tough times. So why so it's a good question. And in a way, I don't know if I have a really good response. I can kind of tell you just from experience or my
Yeah.
gut. I think in many cases, and you hear this all the time in various forms of social media. Oh, you didn't have a strong enough relationship with the business. Oh, you didn't know their goals or their objectives. Oh, there's no ongoing cadence of communications. Oh, you're not cascading the higher level corporate goals to HR and then to learning,
Mm.
right? You hear a lot of this stuff, and I'm thinking about this more from a glass half full perspective. I'm not exactly sure why L&D or frankly other support functions, it could be
Mm-hmm.
legal, it could be fulfillment, it could be distribution, it could be anything but go to market, really, anything but sales, and I think sales support in many regards. I think a lot of it is the fact that the learning function, the L&D function, and talent and HR to a certain degree,
Mm-hmm.
we've been in this really interesting box. And this box is one where on one side it's a container. We're kind of protected because in many ways, you know, you must build the talent and the skills and the capability of your workforce or you're not going to survive. That's just black and white. So you need to protect that. But by virtue of the fact that it's a box, it's a container with X number of walls, oftentimes a lot of folks outside of that box, they don't see what's happening inside. And oftentimes the folks that are myopically stuck in the box, they don't know what's on the outside. I'm being a little silly the way I kind of describe it this way. But my point here is if you don't really have that clear visibility of value, where does your box or the lack of box fit in the value chain of the business succeeding? If there's not that visibility in terms of where you play, the value that you provide, ideally the analytics and the insights that you're providing back to the business, blah, 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 then yeah, you might get, tagged and flagged in terms of, well, I don't really kind of see the value of that entity, box or not. So I am seeing that. I think there's other just kind of a very real reality that a lot of people don't talk about this, but for a lot of particularly tech companies, large tech
Mm-hmm.
companies, without giving out names, in many cases they overhired.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they overhired pre-pandemic, during pandemic, or post-pandemic, I think in many cases they overhired. And now they're trying to, for lack of a better word, Sarah, kind of rejigger their way back to reality. But they can't admit the fact that they overhired. So in many cases, they're just saying, "Oh, well, it's the natural, organic reduction in force or whatever they're calling that. But I also think that's actually a real reality. I also think that's something that's happening as well that we need to kind of be conscious of. But yeah, it's a tough question in terms of why L&D might be targeted. I
Yeah.
don't think any clear-minded executive um, would, which is 99.9% of most executives out there, they're targeting L&D in this fashion. I
Mm.
think at the end of the day, the board might say, listen, it's black and white times now. We need to be sure where are we getting monetary or high growth or footprint value, either margin or ARR or whatever it might be, or renewals, and then kind of take it from there. And in many cases, except for sales training or sales enablement, you're not really close to, annual renewal or annual revenue or renewals or, different forms of margin and so forth. So yeah, it's really interesting
Interesting.
times.
It is. And I think, when we talk about proving that value, let's hone in on that for a second, just as a follow up. Because I think we see training associated with things like shortening time to confidence and providing the business value with maybe a quicker sales ready workforce or things of that nature. Are there any other pieces that you think that leaders can hone in on to show value, or any other advice there?
Well, I think the obvious one, and I hate to say it that way, clearly make sure that you are aligned with the business. Clearly make sure that while your function's goals may not exactly cascade up, understand how they would or could, even if you have to tell the story, or even if there's a longer term gain, right? So and then there's the relationship is still very, very important. There's an AI piece here as well. I wrote this thing a few months ago. It's kind of this corny, you know, phrase title. It was L&D is the new R&D. And the whole idea here is I think L&D has responsibility to do more research and development related to AI to benefit the company. Because in a way, if you look at all the different functions within a large enterprise, in a way, whoever's doing creation, not saying that's the be all end all, they're starting to find efficiencies and gains, which is typically marketing and typically learning and other forms. So if you identify those gains up front and then ideally help train or educate, hello, that's also part of our bailiwick, the folks downstream in terms of helping to provide that helping to shepherd the benefits of this new stuff. I think that's also really, really beneficial. You did mention something too about time to confidence.
Yes.
Is that,
Mm-hmm.
I love that term. The way that I think about it too is time to confidence is important because a lot of folks don't rely on the importance of confidence. Doesn't matter if you're a salesperson or an engineer or whatever. Confidence is a big deal. There's a lot of science behind it. The way that I like to kind of reposition it, because if you talk about, time to confidence to business people, they're going to go, what are you saying?
That's not a metric.
That's the what's that? They all fall by, the whole kind of, acumen and attributes of, time to productivity
Right.
or time to quota, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way I kind of see things transitioning, the time to quota, time to productivity, absolutely. But when you're looking at, I think, the whole worker, the human that you're working with now, and the fact that you're trying to make sure that they are independent, I like the idea and the phraseology of time to autonomy,
Oh,
right? How quickly can we grow you, develop you, give you that level of confidence so that way you are so self-sufficient in your own positive, productive ways.
I love
And if we
that.
can figure out, the time to autonomy aspects, you're going to be autonomous if you're productive. You're going to be autonomous if you're a salesperson that you're probably making quota or at least consistently getting close enough. But there's so many other attributes,
Yeah.
particularly related to the employee experience and broad wellness, and you got to take care of yourself. And if you're not aware of who you are, for lack of better words, and not trying to be filled with jargon, then you might not have that full level of I'm bringing my whole self, my whole autonomous self to work. And I think that's so important.
I think so too. And then we show up better, right? To your point, we show up better. We do our jobs better. We're more engaged. We probably have a better work-life balance associated with it. I love that. Big on mental health and whole person, looking at people as all people. And I think what's great is that we're starting to see organizations shift this way, right? This is why I think the skill-based organization has started to grow in popularity a little bit, and looking at people as a collection of skills, not just the degree, not just the job title that they had. So I think that's really important too. Do you have a take on the SBO? That term's kind of everywhere, to your point around jargon.
I'm going to get in trouble, Sarah. I'm going to get
Oh
into a
dear.
lot of,
I love trouble. Let's do it.
oh, Sarah, trouble. Um, well, this is so I wrote this series at the end of last year called Tasks versus Skills.
Yes, you did.
And it really took off, which is really cool. My point here wasn't about, tasks against skills. My point was, and still is to a very, very strong degree, and I think a lot of folks are maybe supporting this thinking, and that is skills are paramount. Skills are non-negotiable. Skills are core. Skills are still the center of gravity if you want your company to survive. There's no doubt. What's really, really interesting is there's just been a lot of, I hate to use the word hype, but there's been a lot of promotion that's actually been fueled by some of the AI stuff related to, skills first and skills centricity and skills-based organizations. And do you have the right skills strategy and all this stuff? Again, that's all very, very critical, important. The reason why I put together this series is you need to understand that the number one ingredient that fuels skills in many regards is the individual thing, the activity, the exercise, the task that people do to further enable and foster a successful skill. The statement that I tend to think about is, would you rather have a task that is successfully accomplished, or would you rather have a skill that is obtained but never applied? And I think the rational thinking is, well, you need both, but at the end of the day, from a business perspective, I need to get stuff done. And the stuff that's more quantifiable from a measured standpoint, and qualifiable from a measurable standpoint, my belief is it's at the task level, right? It's fairly binary. Did Mark or did Sarah get it done successfully or not?
Yes.
And you can't really say that in many, many ways for skills for a lot of different reasons, different definitions, different ways of tagging, different ways of showing, does completion equal application? I mean, there's a lot of ways to kind of think about this. And so, I mean, you guys know, obviously, in terms of the core focus of your business. But anyway, that's the way I've been kind of thinking about it. Because at the end of the day, it's about the right balance. That's all.
Yeah.
And you can't have that right balance if it's all 99%, myopic skills focus rather than, folks, it ain't going to be perfect 50-50, but it is going to toggle. But the last thing, I don't know where we're at with the timer, but the last thing is the other reason why I really wanted to have put this series together is when you're looking at AI, AI at the end of the day, it's a machine. It is a variety of very, very wonderful zeros and ones, but it's a machine, and the machine works best in binary, quantifiable and qualifiable, but quantifiable measures. So when we're looking at like sophisticated prompting for a large language model, whichever one you use, the more specific at the task level you want it to do something for you, the more accurate and relevant its response is going to be. Not all the time, but the vast majority of the time, if you don't ask that task level thing. The other thing, and then I'll stop, is when you're looking behind the scenes in terms of the engineers and the coders and the program project managers, product folks that are actually building the large language models and the reasoning behind it, they work best at the task level itself. Because in many, many ways, and this could be controversial, my last comment, I'm not really sure if LLMs, as an example, if they truly have a skill capability. Because at the end of the day, they want to provide the right type of binary service. You want this, I'll do that. I'm not going to be gray unless you ask me to be gray, et cetera, et cetera. So, And I think it's just so important
Interesting.
to understand that distinction.
I think so too. And I love what you said about tasks because I think it just furthers the point that skill application, right, in completing the task is such an important aspect. And I think AI makes that even more prevalent, right? Like looking at someone's ability to apply the skill, to demonstrate the skill, that performance based skill validation becomes so incredibly important. If you can put anything into an LLM and get a response, knowledge has essentially become a commodity, like not a commodity anymore. Anybody can get it. And at the instantaneous click of their fingers or typing something in, but it makes us as organizations, as leaders, as managers, what have you, need to know that the behavior exists, right? As you said, that the skill exists. And really, I would argue, and if you have an opinion, I'd love to hear it, that the best way to do that is behavior, is performance, is to see somebody be able to do that, especially now with AI. So, really quick, any reaction?
Oh boy. Um, um, Getting back to your piece around knowledge,
Yeah.
knowledge as a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just super, super fascinating. There's a bunch of articles that came out 7 or 8 months ago about it costs so much money to train a large language model because you got to feed it all this data and all this information, and it's coming from the internet or not. And there's a couple articles that said something to the effect of, well, you know what? Here's the reality, people. The reality is we have run out of data.
Mm.
Even though there's, petabytes galore, xenobytes, or whatever the term is of data out
Mm-hmm.
there. I found that really, really interesting because part of the conundrum of building a more sophisticated large language model or whatever the next version is going to be, you still have to feed it stuff to make it smart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, if the stuff, the grocery store smartness, is now maxed out, whether it's your local store or a local Costco. For those of you maybe outside the US, you might not know, but Costco is a really big box food store. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Great hot dogs, by the way. But if you believe that we're running out of data,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's mind blowing because now you're starting
Yeah.
to think about, well, shoot, are we running out of, you think about the climate. Are we running around? Is there too much CO2? Are we running out of oxygen? Are we running out of clean water? Are we running about all these things? And now you're saying there's this man-made thing called data,
Mm-hmm.
which in a way is going to ensure the survivability of mankind. We're running out of data.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about all these science fiction movies and stuff. My point here is what I think is really, really fascinating is if that's at all true, that at some point we're running out of enough knowledge to feed the machines,
Mm-hmm.
then guess what's going to happen? I think what's going to happen is the machines are going to start to create their own knowledge on their own,
Oh,
good and bad.
okay.
And the other thing is, where I'd love to write a screenplay about this. The other thing is, I wouldn't be surprised if there's this wonderful global contest that happens one weekend out of the year globally, where everyone must creatively contribute back to some ginormous database,
Mm-hmm.
something that has never been thought about or created before,
Hackathon.
but at a global scale.
Oh,
And you
interesting.
can create a whole bunch of algorithms to drive what's a high quality chunk of net new knowledge
Yeah.
and have some fun with it. But then it gets kind of weird and creepy because some people are going to work it. Then what are they going to work? They're going to work, knowledge actually coming from, corrupt sources, or they're going to try to work the algorithm. Anyway, we're a little bit off in science fiction land. But getting back to your point about knowledge, I just think it's
Yeah.
really, really fascinating. And at some point, if we do run out, uh, who's going to save us? Is it going to be
True.
the machine, or is it going to see or is it going to be my last point? Take this home. It's a bumper sticker statement. Is it really going to be the creativity of humans that drives survival?
Oh.
And if it's the creativity of humans that drives survival, creativity meaning creating new insights, information, art, whatever,
Okay.
that's powerful. And that really puts the glass half full perspective, I think, in a much larger size glass.
It does, and makes practice and again with the applying and the getting hands on ever more important inside of that. So I love it. Okay, we are close to time. we have one more 5-minute segment left, and I want to get into the advice that you have for folks on actually getting AI ready, right? We talked about task versus skills. We've talked about readiness versus actually being skilled, AI by roles. Where should we go if you had advice to leverage kind of getting AI ready inside of an org? What might you give 1 or 2 pieces of advice?
Yeah, it's a really, really hot question. But I mean, it's an important question from a temperature check perspective. I think it's a really important question. The way I kind of would frame it is, well, let me kind of step back, and this will be within the 5 minutes. The way I kind of frame it, this is the way I kind of frame it is, I grew up working in restaurants. I paid for school working in restaurants as a waiter and all this kind of stuff. And I've always had like this restaurant mentality. I don't know why, whether for you, Sarah, or folks on this webinar, if you've worked in a restaurant and you know that whole construct, that whole aspect, that whole culture, service, speed, quality, customer friendliness, da da da. Anyway, that's how I kind of grew up. I grew up in restaurants. So to answer your question, the way that I think about, particularly for talent and L&D teams, how they might want to consider moving forward with building their own team's AI capabilities, I kind of frame it from this restaurant metaphor. The metaphor is basically, imagine a restaurant, and the restaurant essentially has 2 sections. There's the front of the house, the dining room. So this is where all the diners' experiences occur. You know, this is where I want convenience. This is where I want ideally speed. This is what I want quality. This is where I want my own menu, whether I'm a vegan or a big carne meat eater. Now, the front of the house in this example is you need to frame your thinking in terms of what is AI going to do for me and my team in terms of, guess what, impacting the front of the house learner experience. So there's the activities that happen in front of the user, the diner, in this case, the learner, and frame it in terms of, okay, what are the things that I need to compartmentalize that's going to change how the learners are experiencing their learning or their social learning or their growth, whatever. And then once you start to frame it from that perspective, it makes it a little easier in terms of, out of this big, gigantic ocean of noise and confusion, where do I start? I kind of think about, number one, think about it from a learner, diner, user's perspective. If you're in a restaurant, I want a specific menu, I want a specific size, or I want the option of takeout or drive-through, whatever. That's the learner's experience. And then what's the other side of the restaurant? It's clearly the kitchen. So what's happening behind the scenes that's really going to enable and foster a beautiful learner or diner experience is all those guys and gals with the fancy hats or not, you know, that are thinking about ingredients, quality, perishability, durability of content, sourcing of content, types of content. They're also thinking about pots and pans, or guess what? You know, what's the actual systems of tools that I'm going to be using that need to change related to using AI. They need to think about their recipe book, right? Beforehand, if I'm making an awesome, whatever, lasagna, right? Here's those 16 things. Well, guess what? Now I've got this sous chef right next to me that's an AI agent. And you know what? This sous chef is great at making soups or sauces, a saucier. I'm just making this up. But my point here is, for those 16 ingredients to build an awesome lasagna, if now AI working behind the scenes, the learner doesn't see it, can now offset or augment something unique to what is a quality item in your domain on your menu, that's something actually to cherish. We just got to figure out who's that guy or gal agent and what are they going to do with those 16 ingredients or the portion of the 16 ingredients. Anyway, that's the way I kind of frame it is if we don't kind of bring it down to earth a little bit in terms of, in my view, Sarah, the learner experience and the behind the scenes operations, then we're going to get a little kind of fuzzy and gray, and then we're not going to have the same language and definitions similar to skills. If you don't have the same definitions and language, then confusion typically happens. But that's maybe not the best sophisticated answer, but that's the way I think about it.
I like it. I like it. And that's all rooted in strategy, right? It has to be guided by a plan for both sides. And I think that is fantastic. Well, we are at time. So we are going to say thank you to you. This has been incredibly helpful, useful. I love your use of metaphors to really drive home relevance. That is so helpful for people like me, neurodiverse brains especially. So thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody who made the time to be here with us. We will see you on the next one. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sarah.